Hello, students. This is Teacher Ken. Welcome to this intermediate class in which we are going to learn how to use either and neither correctly. Some people say either and neither, but for the sake of the lesson, I say either and neither, and that's the way they are going to be sounding for today's class. Now, just one moment. I hope you are ready for some learning. Let me go ahead and share the screen, okay? So, before I even start with either, I would like us to remember what we saw on the previous class. On the previous class, we started using to. And when were we using to? We will be using to when we have two affirmative ideas that are the same, okay? When I have two affirmative statements that are the same, I can connect them using and to. The example that we have here, John can play the piano, Alice can play the piano. We will say, John can play the piano and Alice can too. When we have two negative statements, we are going to use and either, okay? So first, we're going to use and either when both statements are negative, and we're going to use them with the same structure that we used with and to on the previous exercise, okay? If you have questions about that and to or and so, you can check the previous video that is under B1, the other intermediate video, intermediate level, sorry. That one is for to and so. Now, let me go ahead and read the examples here as we follow the underlining. We have, again, negative statements. So, John isn't a teacher. Mary isn't a teacher. You would say, John isn't a teacher and Mary isn't either. So, if both statements were affirmative, John is a teacher, Mary is a teacher, you would say, John is a teacher and Mary is too. But because in this case, both ideas are negative, we have John isn't a teacher and Mary isn't either. Let's continue with the other examples here. It says Paul can't play the violin. Alice can't play the violin. We have two negative statements. So you will say, Paul can't play the violin and Alice can't either, okay? And Alice can't either. Just one moment, see? Okay, good. Let's continue with the next exercise. It says, Helen doesn't play baseball. Alice doesn't play baseball. Helen doesn't play baseball and Alice doesn't either. So again, we have two negative statements and the structure after the comma will be and Alice doesn't either. This is very important to remember, the contrast between the affirmative and negative, okay? Let me go ahead and read the additional examples that we have here. And it says, Alice isn't going to eat in a restaurant. Sorry, in the restaurant. We have the negative right here. So, Alice isn't going to eat in the restaurant, and Helen isn't either. We have and Helen isn't either. Paul wasn't hungry, and George wasn't either. Paul wasn't hungry, and George wasn't either. Repeat. Okay, just a moment. Very good. Now let's see. It says, Mr. Smith didn't forget the address. We have didn't. And Miss Ford didn't either. Let me repeat. Mr. Smith didn't forget the address, and Miss Ford didn't either. Yes. Let's see. And the last example says, homework isn't always easy, and examinations aren't either. Homework isn't always easy, and examinations aren't either. I'm going to read them one more time. I will read them completely, and you can go ahead and repeat after me. I will give you some time, okay? Only these additional examples. Alice isn't going to eat in the restaurant, and Helen isn't either. Repeat. Paul wasn't hungry, and George wasn't either. Mr. Smith didn't forget the address, and Miss Ford didn't either. Homework isn't always easy, and examinations aren't either. Okay, now, because we just saw 2 on the previous video for the intermediate level, we're going to practice both 2 and either for this lesson. We're going to go to exercise 7. Exercise 7 is on page 118 of the English Sentence Structure book, That is page 131 on the PDF that is available for free. Let me organize this here just a little. I'm going to give you a small note, just some guidance for you to remember. When we have two negative ideas, we're going to use either. And when we have two affirmative statements, if you see here, there is nothing negative. We're going to use to. Remember that when we're using to, we have to use not the action, but the auxiliary, meaning that if we have an action in present, we use do or does. If the action is in past, we use did, so on, so forth. So let me just do a little more underlining right here. Remember, it's always going to be and person auxiliary to, or and person auxiliary in negative form either. Okay? We're going to go from the examples. I am going to read the statement and I am going to give you the moment so that you can formulate the structure using to or either. And I am going to go ahead and after that say the correct structure so that you can go ahead and compare it to what you have. And after that, you can repeat it after me. I will give you some time for that also. Let's go from the examples. And it says, George read a book. George read a good book last night. Alice read a good book last night. Okay. George read a good book last night, and Alice did too. Repeat. Very good. George isn't hungry. Alice isn't hungry. George isn't hungry and Alice isn't either. Okay, let's go ahead and go from number 1. George can't go to the party tonight. Alice can't go to the party tonight. George can't go to the party tonight, and Alice can't either. Repeat. Okay. George isn't studying. Alice isn't studying. George isn't studying, and Alice isn't either. Repeat. He can play the piano. She can play the piano. He can play the piano and she can too. George isn't tired now. John isn't tired now. George isn't tired now, and John isn't either. Repeat. Bob and Alice will be here tomorrow. We will be here tomorrow. Bob and Alice will be here tomorrow, and we will too. They don't have to come. We don't have to come. They don't have to come, and we don't either. John should write home. Mary should write home. John should write home, and Mary should too. John studies every day. Mary studies every day. John studies every day, and Mary does too. We shouldn't arrive late. The teacher shouldn't arrive late. We shouldn't arrive late, and the teacher shouldn't either. We have to arrive on time. He has to arrive on time. We have to arrive on time, and he does too. We don't have to arrive early. He doesn't have to arrive early. We don't have to arrive early, and he doesn't either. John arrived late yesterday. His friend arrived late yesterday. John arrived late yesterday, and his friend did too. John is going to visit Canada. George is going to visit Canada. John is going to visit Canada, and George is too. My shoes were expensive. My suit was expensive. My shoes were expensive, and my suit was too. They won't go to the store. I won't go to the store. They won't go to the store, and I won't either. Mr. Hill plays volleyball very well. Mr. Smith plays volleyball very well. Mr. Hill plays volleyball very well, and Mr. Smith does too. Just one moment, guys. Sorry, over there. Now, remember that, again, for this exercise, if we have two affirmative ideas, we're going to finish with two, and if we have two negative ideas, we're going to use either. This is following the first structure. On the previous video, we also saw an alternative structure for two affirmative statements. That was using and so. I have it down here. We have and so can be used in place of and to, as in the following sentences. I can go and John can too means the same as saying I can go and so can John. Now, we're going to do the same with either and neither. And that is what is going to change the structure. It's going to change the order of the words, okay? The word neither is already negative. So we are not going to use a double negative after the comma. Let me explain what I mean. In this case, we have Mary can't go and Helen can't either. We have one negative here, and then after the comma we have a fresh idea. We have another negative here. We have the negative, and because we have the negative, we use either. Okay? Now, when we want to use neither, the order of the words changes. So we would say, and neither and we don't add a negative to the auxiliary. So I would say Mary can't go, and neither can Helen. I need you guys to get this straight, okay? You cannot say Mary can't go and neither can't Helen. That is incorrect. Please don't say it ever, okay? The two forms are right there on the screen. Mary can't go and Helen can't either, or Mary can't go and neither can Helen. Because this structure changes the order of the words, I would like to practice the same exercise using the secondary structure on both scenarios. Meaning that in the case of to, we're going to use so, and we're going to say, and so did Alice. And in the case of the two negatives, we're going to say, and neither is, in this case, Alice. Okay? Here, move this over here. Okay. Let me put it right over here. I just want to keep it on a single line. There you go. Okay? So, using the same colors, if we have two affirmative statements, we're going to use and so, and we're going to use and neither when the two ideas are negative. Just a moment, guys. There you go. Let me just change that color right here. Okay. Right there. Okay. Now, guys, let's just go ahead and go through the same exercise. We are again doing exercise 7, and we're going to practice the structures of and so and neither. Okay. So it says, George read a good book last night. Alice read a good book last night. George read a good book last night, and so did Alice. Repeat. George isn't hungry. Alice isn't hungry. George isn't hungry, and neither is Alice. George can't go to the party tonight. Alice can't go to the party tonight. George can't go to the party tonight, and neither can Alice. George isn't studying. Alice isn't studying. George isn't studying, and Alice isn't either. Repeat. He can play the piano. She can play the piano. He can play the piano, and so can she. Repeat. George isn't tired now. John isn't tired now. George isn't tired now, and neither is John. Bob and Alice will be here tomorrow. We will be here tomorrow. Bob and Alice will be here tomorrow, and so will we. They don't have to come. We don't have to come. They don't have to come, and neither do we. John should write home. Mary should write home. John should write home, and so should Mary. John studies every day. Mary studies every day. John studies every day, and so does Mary. We shouldn't arrive late. The teacher shouldn't arrive late. We shouldn't arrive late, and neither should the teacher. We have to arrive on time. He has to arrive on time. We have to arrive on time, and so does he. We don't have to arrive early. He doesn't have to arrive early. We don't have to arrive early, and neither does he. John arrived late yesterday. His friend arrived late yesterday. John arrived late yesterday, and his friend did too. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't give you the right structure. I'm sorry, let me repeat number 12. Using and so, you would say, John arrived late yesterday, and so did his friend. Repeat. John is going to visit Canada. George is going to visit Canada. John is going to visit Canada, and so is George. My shoes were expensive. My suit was expensive. My shoes were expensive, and so was my suit. They won't go to the store. I won't go to the store. They won't go to the store, and neither will I. Mr. Hill plays volleyball very well. Mr. Smith plays volleyball very well. Mr. Hill plays volleyball very well, and so does Mr. Smith. Okay, remember, this is the kind of exercise that you are not going to get correct the first times. You have to repeat this exercise a few times until it gets settled, let's say, correctly in your head. We are internalizing structures, and that only comes with repetition. I hope you enjoyed today's class. Remember that if you have any questions, you can leave me any comment in YouTube, or you can go ahead and send me a message in WhatsApp. Thank you very much for being here. And again, remember, English is easy. You just need to practice. See you next class.